Welcome back to AME's Facilitated Session Series, where mentorship and mastery unite to fuel your journey in medicine. I am your co-host and moderator, Dr. Darren Jackson, and I'm joined by the esteemed Dr. or Dean, as I like to call him, Dr. David Leon Taylor.
Welcome back to all of our aspiring physicians to Season 3 of Facilitated Sessions. We're so excited that you're here to join us. DJ, what's on deck for today?
So, DT, this is an interesting benchmark that we are having. You want to know why today is special?
Yes, please share with us.
So today is special because we're now about a week away from orientation of our M1 year of medical school, right? Yes. So we have checked all the boxes from our pre-med facilitated sessions. We've mastered everything that we needed to know within the pre-med context. And now we are matriculating into the medical school context. So we have a whole litany of things that we want to talk about that our student doctors can learn from. So you want to jump in?
Absolutely. And so it's an important milestone because, of course, future doctors, pre-medical scholars have been going through MCAT preparation with us. Mm-hmm. They've gone through the AMCAS application process, as you know, the secondary interview preparation. And ultimately, we all want to be admitted to medical school.
Absolutely.
And now the next important step is, yes, we've been admitted to medical school, but how do we start off right? As you always say, DJ, what is the best way to balance both learning and wellness? And clearly, there are some data that underscores the importance of active learning processes right at the beginning of your first year of medical education.
Right. So in 2014, there was a landmark meta-analysis done by Freeman and his team that showed that there was about a 6% increase in test scores for students that were enrolled in active learning-based courses compared to students that were in just lecture-based courses. They also found that it was about a 1.5, that students in these active-based courses were about 1.5 less likely to not meet their goals of a passing score on an exam. So with that being said, what is the right approach for students going into their M1 year? I'm a first year medical student. I'm getting ready for orientation. How should I be intentional at this moment about how I learn?
The first key is to, when we talk about active learning, there's an accountability on the part of the learner, which means that the student is driven to engage in that process versus allowing the teacher to drive the learning process. You, as the learner, drive the process. And that means that you and I, for example, could be in a peer study group, and we agree that we're going to prepare for the lecture in advance by using the professor's learning objectives, which are key targets of information that we're supposed to learn and then actually think about as we look to solve patient problems. Right. Now, that's just one sample of an active learning strategy working with a peer. We're going to come back and talk about some other active learning strategies as a first year medical student. DJ, I'm reminded of something very important that you talked about when we were talking about the MCAT, and that's starting off right. We have to have a wellness plan in place. Yes. Because if we are well, we can optimally learn. Help us with the wellness piece, and then we'll come back and talk about more active learning strategies.
And with that, we need to be intentional about our wellness ecosystem. So a lot of times what the data is showing is that during this M1 year, our medical students are becoming burnt out for a variety of different reasons. It could be course load, social issues, identity issues of that particular student within imposter syndrome. And so in our first and second season of facilitated sessions, we talked about a variety of tools that all of our medical students can put into their toolkit to get through some of these kind of hardships that we will encounter from time to time during medical school. So DT, we see that during our first year, our strategy is very important for our success. And that carries over into year two, the remainder of medical school, and then into residency and practice, right? And so what we're trying to gain here is an understanding of one, first yourself. This is that identity piece, right? What are the tools that work for you? You have to be very intentional when picking these things, and they have to be very consistent in your practice because you want this to be your default. You want these tools to come into play almost as an autopilot. They kick in as autopilot when certain things within the medical school context starts to come up. So stress, increased workload. Now we're at the middle of the year. Some of the more vigorous, modules are coming up now. And so we need to be able to have these tools in place so this way they can be a default, an autopilot. Now, we talked about some of those things, as we mentioned, GPS. That's from season 1, season 2 of FS. We also talked about journaling. We talked about mindfulness, which we will get into in a little bit more later. But some of these things need to be a cornerstone of our practices for wellness, because this is then going to shape how we are setting the tone for ourselves when we sit down to learn. And each piece is equally as important. That mental health piece and that balance and that learning piece go hand in hand. It's like the yin and yang sign. It fits like a perfect puzzle. And if you don't have both pieces, then the journey becomes a little bit more rocky.
Exactly. And we've seen this over, of course, the 30 years of medical education experience with scholars. When there's challenge, as you know, with their wellness, it truly impacts their ability to focus, to even apply some of the active learning strategies that we'll be discussing in a moment. And I just want to look a little bit deeper level. One of those techniques which has been very helpful for a lot of students, and that's the mindfulness. Share a little bit more about that technique as one tool.
So mindfulness, mindfulness is such a critical part. I use it in my day-to-day. It's such a critical part of how we adjust to things, how we become aware of things, and then how we build the skill sets to be able to regulate ourselves and then navigate those things. But before we get to mindfulness, it kind of brings in what I'm getting ready to talk about, because we'll talk about a mindfulness program that has been showing a lot of success over the years. And I've actually had some personal familiarity with it. And we'll talk about that. But before mindfulness, as a first year medical student getting ready to start my journey, we're a few days out from orientation. One of the few things that we can do to start to prepare ourselves for our wellness strategy plans are looking at what our local resources are for mental health and wellness and balance, and even academic services that are located right on our campuses. So I kind of call this our wellness ecosystem, basically. So your wellness ecosystem should be defined very early on in your medical school career. So you already know, I got accepted to X program. I'll be at X program, presumably, for the next 4 years, right? So this is now my medical school home, right? What are the services right here at my medical school home that I have access to? How many, that's a very important thing for students to understand going in. And if you don't, ask those questions during orientation. Be very proactive. Where can I go if I need a mental health, some mental health assistance? Where can I go? Where on campus are there services for therapy and different kinds of therapy? So all of these things should be defined very early on. And we see that the AMC looks at those things, and they also find it very important that some of their 10 strategies going into medical school is defining what your wellness ecosystem looks like locally. And then you could kind of look out in the town, surrounding area where you are to see where are the resources in my local community that I can also gain from? And then we can go further into not just having those wellness resources that are more academic, so to speak, but more community based, right? So getting into the mindfulness segment, right? Mindfulness, and we call this mind body skills, and this is all to reduce stress. There's a program at Georgetown, the mindfulness program at Georgetown, and I'm, as a former dean there, you're very familiar. And I had some personal interactions with some of the folks that run that program. And it was very funny because some of them came in first year during orientation to do some of these mindfulness practices. And I distinctly remember Dean Taylor, like, give me the questions, man. I don't have time for this meditation.
What are we doing? It's time to study, right?
It's time to study. I don't have time for this meditation stuff. I don't know what you're talking about in terms of no affirmations. I don't have time for that. What is going to give me the success I need on the exams? Because oftentimes, that fixation on exam success, it comes from the top down. I think that type of mentality in terms of being hyper focused on how do we pass the exams, whether or not it's the shelf, the boards, MCAT, whatever, how do we become successful on those tests? And we often underscore how much the mindfulness comes into play with that success. So at Georgetown, my alma mater, your former place of deanship, they have a mind body medicine program, and Nancy
Harasdak and Dr. Adi Haramati.
Yes. So very, very, very cool folks that we met early on in my matriculation at Georgetown. And yeah, like I said, Nancy Harasdak was going through these mindfulness techniques, and all I could think about is, when are we going to get to the question review? This is not going to help. And I wish I had the awareness and the intentionality at that time and the mentorship to tell me, no, sir, this is very important. Because then you wind up being like me, thinking that you can kind of like push through. The work is the priority. The mindfulness and the balance gets checked when it can, and you struggle through your matriculation, through your journey, only to later on in residency come to the revelation that, hey, meditation is good, mindfulness is good. So the mindfulness program at Georgetown has proven to be very successful. I mean, through the literature, it's shown heavy reductions in perceived stress and improvements in the resilience that these medical students that took part in the mindfulness program, had access to. They felt more resilient. They felt less stress. And I think that speaks to the testament of how important mindfulness is to your strategy of success in medical school.
Absolutely, DJ. And that's been replicated now across the country using that Georgetown model under the leadership of Dr. Adi Haramati and Nancy Harasdak. And as you know, Dr. Susan Chang and I, in the most recent years, also worked on a project called Build and Belong, which looks at affirmations in medicine. And that also was a very important intervention in helping students reframe what is their priority in terms of medicine, that scholars, you are not defined by your grade. The grade doesn't define who you are, but your goal, of course, is to be that compassionate, relational, engaged physician who's going to be highly competent and make a difference in the healthcare of families. That's the focus. And then we build around that focus, as you noted, DJ, what are going to be the wellness strategies and tools in our lives to keep that balance so we don't become overwhelmed. Yeah. And I really love the way you talked about every scholar should create his or her own wellness ecosystem, your wellness home. And that wellness home is not simply medical in nature. Sometimes we may need to see a mental health professional or a physician for some physical ailments. But the proactive wellness home also connects us to what brings us joy, right?
Right.
And the people in whom we enjoy engaging in other social activities. What are some other aspects of our wellness home that are important?
So other aspects of our wellness home that are very important, like we talked about, the people, the places, the context, the activity, and then also the alignment with who we are. So everybody has their thing. Mine is roller skating, you know? And so when I found the DMV roller skating community, that became my outlet. And it became something that I felt grounded in. I felt fulfilled because not only did I take part in roller skating, but I transformed my love of roller skating into a business, an organization that fueled the community through education, through health, literacy, through advocacy, and all of these various different things. So the context is very important because it's not just the activity. It's the activity plus the additional things that come with it that makes you feel fulfilled.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that too, because as you describe some of the other outcomes,
Right.
in addition to just your own personal joy with skating, I also hear health equity. I also hear health literacy. I also hear advocacy, because you're using the skating community, engaging the skating community as an opportunity to engage community around health and these other issues, which is truly excellent.
It hooks you in and locks you right into other opportunities. And then you find more things that drive you and that fuel you. All of this is, you know, on a micro level, while we may not really be consciously processing all of the good that it is adding into our actual learning, because, you know, the thing still is, you know, we can say, Dean Taylor, we can say all we want that mindfulness and mental health is a very important part of your journey in medical school and throughout, you know, medicine in general. But there's going to be a lot of you all out there that was just like me, who says, I got you, but give me the questions, right? And so,
True. And we'll bring you back to this FS
Right.
at that time. But the good news is the seed has been planted.
right.
That wellness truly can drive your success and learning. And if we keep it as an anchor, as you've noted, DJ, it really does optimize your ability to fully engage your career in medicine. Because if you are well, then you're in a position to help others become well. Yes. Right? And so that brings us now to our active learning. Because as you said, if you have wellness, now we're able to receive recommendations for learning. And in that active learning process that we teased earlier in the FS, we talked about, obviously, one strategy is working together.
Right.
Now, this working together, by the way, also builds social connection and support, which is what, see, you're in my head, DJ, which is what you reminded me of, that social connection in learning can also build success because you feel engaged with someone else. You don't feel isolated. Now you have more motivation to participate in the learning process, right? So working together as a team, medicine is a team process, right? Lots of collaboration. We practice our thinking skills. It's very active. We push one another, right? Another active learning strategy is in thinking through, what will I do for my structured lectures? There's always going to be some level of structured lectures where we have to receive the information from the professor. Well, what if I did an effective preview of that lecture beforehand? Again, using the professor's learning objectives as a guide for important points I should understand. I could literally take a sheet of paper, very simple, and on the left side, fold in half. On the left side, say, what questions do I have from what I previewed? And on the right side, the answer. And when I go to lecture, of course, now you don't do this with a piece of paper. Y'all have the nice iPads where you can split the screen up, your Android equivalent, etc., right? But when you go to lecture, you're actively listening for the responses to the questions that you had because you prepared.
I'm finding this funny because all of the things you're talking about right now, I just hear you 10 plus years ago
Yes.
in that Georgetown School of Medicine basement,
That is
you know,
correct.
in the classrooms, the LA Suite classrooms, drilling these things in from hot note sheets,
Yes.
you know, to alignment with the learning objectives and the lectures, and how you look at your learning objectives, how you navigate the the primary resource with the learning objectives, then incorporating the secondary resource. You know, all of these things you drilled into us, you know, during, you know, our medical school years, and it really paid off because it saves a lot of time. It saves
Big
a
piece.
lot of time. So you take that 8-hour study session and chop it down to 2 hours, and then now you have a whole 6 hours for other things, wellness,
Other things.
connecting with
That's
family,
right.
you know.
So you can use wellness. Sometimes, as we know in medical school, there are other things that have to be done as well.
Yes.
Because that was
Personal
only
stuff.
the personal stuff. So there's personal things going on in your life. There's wellness. Sometimes there are other responsibilities as a medical student. You may have 3 lectures, 4 lectures in one day.
Right.
So you have to be very efficient. So we're going to move to time management in a moment because people underestimate time. So I'm glad you kind of, you know, mentioned that piece as another tease to the next level. But as we were saying, those are 2 active processes that we could use to engage us,
Right.
which means that you as the medical student, that first year medical student, you're driving that process. You're not coming in as a first year medical student saying, I've arrived and okay, teach me. You are driving the process to say, how can I contribute not only to my own learning, but to the learning of my colleagues? And how can I engage the faculty so I can grow to be an outstanding problem solver in medicine? That's the key to active learning. Of course, I know, DJ, you're going to have some resources to download from the AME website that'll have additional active learning strategies. Now, another key to your success as a first year medical student, and you just hit it, is time management. Oh, you're going to be so surprised where your time goes. You have to have time for the lecture, time to prepare for the lecture, time to review lectures, time to engage in small groups, time to be in lab, time for cadaveric dissection, time to do ambulatory care in the community, time to prepare for patient presentations, time,
You're making
and
me
you
tired.
still, exactly, we're tired
Already
already,
just-
right?
already just
You
thinking about it,
still
yeah.
need to have time for you
Right.
and the ones you love and other things that are important to you. So this wellness piece is coming back again. So time management will equal strategic outcomes for you in terms of your academic goals, but also your personal goals. So one of the recommendations we always give is to block. We call it block your time. We first must block time for wellness and what's important to us, because that gives us balance. Then we block time for how we prepare for lectures and block time for how we then think about information that we learn from lectures. Again, we'll have a nice little strategic tool resource for you to download to have more details about that, because it's a stepwise process. We'll also have another, probably in the future, a deep dive FS where we illustrate that step by step with actually some live first year medical school content.
And you did it with
very
us.
in-depth.
And you called it back in the day FSBs.
Yes.
Excuse me.
ASBs.
ASBs.
Available study blocks.
Available study blocks.
Now hold on. Now some scholars said FSBs, they thought it was a free study block.
Oh, no.
But it wasn't a free study block.
No,
They were supposed to be studying.
Available, yeah.
Available study
Available
blocks.
study blocks. And back in the day, when you gave us, you really sat us down to say, okay, what are your available study blocks? This was like us understanding the intentionality that has to go into your planning and your scheduling, because then that goes into your time management. And like you said, your time management, when we talked about the 6 additional hours you may have for other things, and I referenced the wellness. The wellness is taking care of those other things, those personal matters, the grocery list, the laundry, the calling grandma, life. That is the wellness, because you can go out and go to the gym, but if all of the other things are not taken care of, let's just say gym and exercise, or riding your bike, roller skating is a part of your wellness toolkit. You can do that, neglect to do some of these personal matters, even if that means showing up in family, showing up for family time. When you're not feeling fulfilled, and that's something that is key to you, if that's a foundation for you, is family is a foundation for you, and you don't make time for family, you're not making time for wellness. And that's just really what it is, because once that day passes and you haven't checked in with family, and then that week passes, or just the way you're engaging or showing up for family is irregular for you, you feel this disconnect, this dissonance between what you feel grounded in, which would be family, and what you're actually being able to do. And so with that intentionality of looking at these available study blocks, here's where I have the study, and then here's how I make my studying efficient. This is how I get the time to do these other life things, plus my specific wellness things that allows me to feel completely balanced.
And now you're hitting on that next level, because now what's happened is we've opened up with making sure we understand we start with wellness. Right. We then connected, okay, now that we're well, we have our active learning strategies, and we also look at time management. These are 2 key anchors. As a first year medical student, those first 6 to 8 weeks are going to go very fast, and there are some significant amount of material and a significant number of exams within the first 6 to 8 weeks of medical school. This is very important. So we've looked at connecting the wellness to, okay, I got my active learning, I got my efficient time management, but now this balance piece, how we balance it all, comes into play to what you sometimes call equity and risk. I really like that. When you talk about equity and risk with respect to wellness, and I want you to say a little bit more about how do we build more equity, fairness to ourselves for wellness, and mitigate risk of not allowing ourselves to engage in wellness. And if that happens, if we don't mitigate that risk proactively, then we're back to that burnout society that you talked about.
Yeah.
And that could be a big challenge.
So equity and risk, how we navigate the equity and risk from this context of wellness in medical school really simply comes down to the first major thing. And you know that song that they sing is called "You Gotta Have Faith."
Mm-hmm. Now, do you want me to sing that?
Don't.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. Also, I know some of you are also putting in the comments right now, please do not sing that detail. I'm with you. Okay.
You gotta have faith in yourself.
Yes.
You have to have confidence that you have the ability to ground yourself, because if you can develop whatever wellness plan and strategy you want, when in real time, you have to put that strategy in play.
Execute.
And if you can't execute it, you won't get the results of the strategy. So it's almost, you kind of almost wasted the time putting the strategy together. So that becomes the risk. The risk is not having confidence in yourself. Because if I have confidence that, hey, I know, you're taking the confidence is coming from having a realistic assessment of yourself, your capabilities, your weaknesses, and then the context that you're in. And that changes from time to time. And knowing that it changes from time to time, allowing yourself to have that flexibility within whatever system that you got to be able to adapt to that particular context that you're currently in. So that self-assessment, that realistic assessment of myself, my capabilities, my weakness, the context, that's one. Two, that's the faith, that's the confidence. Because once you took that realistic assessment, you reflected and you did all the work that you needed to do. So now I have the confidence that my wellness strategies will work. So when that exam is coming up, step one, step two, when applications for match is coming up, how do I rely and default to this particular wellness strategy and I actually feel grounded, right? This is not just something that I'm speaking for vibes, right? This is something that I can do, whether or not it's breath work, whether or not it's mindfulness techniques, and I actually feel some type of elevation in my mood, balance, grounding in my sense of being once it is done. That's the goal, is for it to actually work, right? And so that self-assessment, that confidence, and once those things come into play, you have to be able to have that confidence to say, hey, I know this exam is coming up tomorrow, right? It is midnight, all right? And I just got this uneasy, overwhelmed feeling about myself. But you know that you have studied extensively. You have done everything you needed to do. You've done the team-based and case-based learning, the active learning. You've done everything you need to do. So at this point now, it's midnight, and you should have already been in bed, to be honest with you, right? But it's midnight, and you're now wrestling between with the conversation in your head. Should I go to sleep, or can I get another hour or two in? I could just get 3-4 hours in before the exam, of sleep,
You know what that is? That's the mental saboteur trying to move you around another direction. Right. And as you know, scholar is fatigued. So making these decisions. These choices.
And when being fatigued, in real time. So at that point, you have to make the decision, because the ambitious student in you, the future ambitious student in you, wants to continue to study. But the person who took the realistic assessment and that has the confidence in themselves knows that they did all they can do. They did they took advantage of all the tools and all the resources. And now I have to stand on the confidence that has worked and it will take me to success in the exam. And you go to sleep. Yes, because that wellness will actually allow you to execute on all those tools and everything you've done. And fatigue clouds it. Right. And so the fatigue clouds it, but what also brings yourself out the cloud is the consistent practice of it. Yes. People often ask me, well, what do you do to stay motivated? I don't have a thing to stay motivated. It's discipline. Yes. It's consistency. Day in, day out. Wash, rinse, repeat. All right. You do the same thing, because then that is when you go into default mode to your wellness plan without even having to think about it. So you can be fatigued. You can be cognitively fatigued, but you're not really exerting too much mental, calories, shall I say, to this decision of whether or not you should go to bed or stay up, because your default is, I trust in my wellness system. And it'll just kick in. And you will go right to bed. And that's part of why we say a lot of times what we're sharing is really behavioral change. Right. It's behavioral change in your learning strategies and behavioral change in your proactive wellness strategies. So this brings us, DJ, to an action plan, where we bring it all together. And when we think about an action plan, we keep it simple, and we look at maybe 3 key learning anchors. So if we were to look at, for a first year medical student starting the year off right, if we're looking at, of course, one element of the wellness would be to make sure that we have 3 key supports. That key support could be a mentor outside of medical school. It can be one of the academic professionals at the medical school, a faculty or a peer who can guide you through any challenges. And then the third could be
campus ministry using one of those resources. It could be an external faith leader, or it could be someone else who encourages another aspect of your being besides academics. So that gives you one piece of wellness. And DJ, I'm going to ask you to give us another piece in a moment. In the middle, if you look at this as a sandwich, so that's the top part of the sandwich. In the middle is your active learning processes, right? And we can give you three there, right? We start with the peer problem solving or active learning, right? The second will be we have active learning during the lecture process where you are already poised based on your preview to be listening for certain key questions that you have had from your preview that now the professor will be discussing in the lecture. And of course, you're strategically making those notes because you know where the lecture is going because of your active preparation and your active listening. And then third, you take advantage, of course, of the case-based problem solving that your school may be offering in different areas. Sometimes we call it problem-based learning, but you have 3 to 5 students in a smaller group, sometimes up to 7 students, where you all participate together to solve problems. All 3 of those are active. Now, that's in the middle, but it's good to have wellness before and wellness after. What's another 3 sort of key wellness anchors, Darren, to close out that M1 success as we go through the first 6 to 8 weeks of the school year?
I like short things. And so since the evidence is already showing that this mindfulness coursework, when you have a mindfulness, intention, even in your curriculum, that the evidence has shown the resilience improves with students and the burnout and stress decreases. So I would start with that. And again, we've talked about different mindfulness techniques, but mindfulness, mind body scanning, awareness, breathing techniques, these are all things that's within that mindfulness umbrella that you can definitely benefit from. We talked about journaling. I think another thing that we spoke about before is movement breaks. Just something as simple as I finished this, block or this, chapter. I'm going to go outside on the podium. I'm just using Georgetown as an example. I'm going to go out on the podium and just take a stroll for 10 minutes and come back. Just even that, is just the reset that a lot of people need to go back into the library and get that flow, that peak flow of focus, whereas though they can manage their time and navigate through that study session in the most effective way. So movement breaks. And I think something that is extremely underscored in the wellness approach or that wellness toolkit is the nutrition. Yes. It is the nutrition. I just had a student today, tell me about, I'm getting headaches and I didn't understand. And the student told me I had to check because typically I'm a person who likes to meal prep. I take, my meals and the quality of the food that I eat very seriously. And because I've been getting overwhelmed with the course load in medical school, I've just, succumbed to the Chick-fil-A here. And, before I know it, I'm eating, just stuff that I don't normally eat. And when I stop, that's when the headache starts. So the nutrition, that gut mind connection, that brain gut connection is extremely important. So, those are some, there's a laundry list, Dean Taylor. There's a laundry list, but just
those are good ones.
Yeah, but those are some good
right.
ones. And I brought up the nutrition piece because that's just that's just one that I encountered even today with talking to a student is the nutrition and the lack of intention, and just not even the lack of intention, because this is something that was a regular practice for this person. The student's like, I like to cook. Meal prep is something that grounds me, but I got so overwhelmed that became less important. And just, not only the process of cooking, which is comfortable and calming to me, went off, to the wayside, but also the actual quality of the food. And both of those things together was giving this student distress. But then when they figured out a way to work it back into their schedule, the headaches are gone. they feel better just even psychologically knowing that they're back on their system of eating good quality food and participating in that process of making the food.
So even psychologically.
Yes.
Even psychologically, that's a big piece that drives us a lot, right? Because there's not only the physical benefit, the time spent, right, preparing, the great food, but the psychological knowing that I'm doing good for me is a great reinforcer. Right. So, DJ, that wraps up another FS, our first FS of season 3. And we're excited now about our next episode in this season because it really links now to what happens after we get a great start as a first-year medical student. That first to 6-8 weeks now, we're settled, wellness plan, we have our active learning, but we actually have to continue to grow.
Right.
Tell us about it.
So our next session of facilitated sessions, we're going to go into the process of how to master learning in medical school. I'm getting tachycardia already thinking back to it, man. You remember that?
Call 911 for aspiring physicians?
You remember
the CPR certified.
CP exam. That's all I'm thinking. CP exam, cardiopulmonary. You remember that block? November through, when was it? November through early December?
It can be. That's the prep time. And then January to March.
Yeah.
Of course, depending on the school's curriculum, it can vary.
Yeah.
But cardiopulmonary, right? Cardiopulmonary module is a critical module for our medical student scholars to master because we have so many cardiopulmonary conditions, right? That is everyday medicine, if you will.
Right. So with that being said, it is very important to know those modules. And so we're going to be taking a look into the preclinical years. So how do we master and navigate getting through our preclinical modules and that USMLE Step 1? Yeah, because before we can get into the wards, we got to master the preclinical work course load, and we also need to get past that Step 1 exam. So I'll see you over in session 2.
That's right. See you at the next FS.